And here we are. Welcome back to the Redshirt Sophomore, where we never said how we were hosts, MD and CD. Today, we're going to be talking about our Week 5 recap. Once again, we were spraying the boards today. The only thing we didn't hit really was our underdogs, but Western
They were
Kentucky should
close.
have won. Western Kentucky should have won. And Akron was in a barn burner with Ohio until the fourth quarter. It is what it is, right? Overall in the week, you know, I was 5-3, picking up just straight up winners in our 8 games that we previewed. I was 4-4 ATS. That puts me at 28-13 against for winners straight up. 26-15 ATS. And then all of a sudden you had a monster week. 6-2 winners and then 6-2 ATS for you. You're now 27-14 picking winners straight up, and 25-16 ATS. We are slaughtering these picks right now. And from a best bets perspective, we did well, and we'll get into that later. The Dirty Dogs talked about, just letting us down there a little bit. But yeah, make sure if you guys are checking out this video for the first time, like the video, first of all, and consider giving us a subscription. If you would, just hit that button. And then also the bell so you get the notification when we're pumping out these episodes twice a week, the recaps and the previews. Now, before we get into the games that we previewed already and our best bets, let's get into the games that maybe we didn't preview. CD and I, we're gonna go back and forth just a little bit, and we're gonna be talking about we're gonna pick some games. Okay, I'm gonna start off the bag, right out of the gate. Kentucky, Ole Miss.
Yeah,
What did we say, Christopher, when Kentucky lost by 1 billion points to South Carolina? What did I say on the show? No one should be selling Kentucky stock at all. And then they had an absolute barn burner with Georgia, which they probably could have and should have won. And then all of a sudden they go to Oxford for the first time in like almost 50 years and beat the hell out of Ole Miss and made an elite offense look garbage.
hmm
Credit Kentucky. And they're running a bit of a two quarterback system there. I know they got a little bit lucky on the Gavin Wimsatt fumble, recovery, touchdown, whatever. But Brock Vandagriff, I thought was okay. Gavin Wimsatt, I mean, they used him, I think, well. All right, that was a great job by Mark Stoops and staff right there. Just unbelievable win. Kentucky over 6.5 wins. Looks pretty good right now.
absolutely. I mean, we said that defense and that defensive line specifically, 4 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, right? Last game, they're good enough to keep them in a lot of football games. We saw them give Georgia a ton of problems. We saw them obviously give Ole Miss a ton of problems. Credit to Vandegrift for coming back after a couple slow games, and he wasn't perfect, not at all, but he did enough to win. Right, Dane Key made some big catches. Barry Brown, they got him involved. And obviously you mentioned with Wimsatt running the football, it was nice. It was a nice little tree. I credit that staff for getting them ready to play right after a couple of tough weeks, and then also fighting, coming back to win that football game in that fourth quarter. In terms of outlook for Ole Miss here, definitely disappointing. I mean, you looked at that talent on that team and that schedule, and you were saying with Oklahoma not looking good, with LSU maybe vulnerable, Florida and Mississippi State just not very good. You were staring down a double-digit win season with 11, 12 win upside in the playoff berth, right? That's the goal this year for Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. And now you lose to Kentucky, and guess what? It does not get much easier in terms of defensive lines that you're playing with South Carolina on the road next week, and then obviously LSU and Georgia later on. It's interesting that maybe they just needed this, little reset. Maybe they needed to kind of get their heads over their heels or their heads down, right? Maybe they're just kind of floating too high, too close to the sun. But it's also a lot of transfers too. So like they're still working together. They're still figuring things out there, especially on that offensive line. So we'll see if it gets better from there. I trust Lane Kiffin and that staff to get it right offensively, but it depends on how quickly can they with South Carolina coming up next week. I'm going to go back to Friday, couple games there. Obviously, Virginia Tech, Miami, and that crazy thriller there, and Washington and Rutgers. Two very good football games, right? Obviously, very enjoyable to watch. The Miami game, credit Cam Ward and that team for coming back in that football game and getting a win, right? They were down 10 points in the fourth quarter. And obviously, say what you want about the last play of the game. It's a win's a win for Miami here. And the way that the ACC is folding out, I mean, they are staring down, obviously, game days next week, out in Berkeley, but it's awesome. And these are sometimes these games that you lose with previous Mario Cristobal, previous Miami football teams, right? Where you don't come out the gates super hot or you're not, flawless here and you kind of let teams get back into it, but you found a way to win. And that tells me a ton about the growth of your program as well as your team. And then Rutgers getting a big win. Now they probably should not have won potentially. And, obviously they're just such an interesting team, man. They never like Monogny's a stud, right? He's a monster. He runs the ball super hard, but like I don't know how they win getting out yarded by 200 plus yards, right? Time possession, like it's just things that you found a win. And again, with their schedule, man, they're gonna be fun if
Dude,
they can win these close games. It's
legitimately, like it is. I'm not gonna say like, look, Oregon, Penn State, even Ohio State out there, like they all have significant matchups against each other. Rutgers does not play any of them. They have a very, very, and we joked about it on the show. We were like, oh, what are the odds for Rutgers to win the Big Ten? Because like legitimately, their schedule is kind of the most favorable that it probably will ever be in this entire football program's history. And it's probably the most talented team that Shiano's had. And it was like plus 10,000 or like 100,000 for them to win. Probably plus, I think it was plus
10,000, I
10,000.
think.
10,000 for them to win the Big Ten. We're like, oh, wouldn't that be funny if someone sprinkled that? Because it's actually not the worst thing that you could do. But here we are, week 5. Rutgers is 5-0.
4-0. 4-0. They had a bye already.
Sorry, 4-0, and they schedule works out where they could make the Big Ten championship. It's
It's
crazy.
not crazy at all. It's not crazy. It's crazy, but it's not crazy. That's
They're,
college
I'm
football.
gonna say I'm gonna guess and say that no, they won't. That would be my prediction, but we're sitting here and there's a reasonable possibility of that happening. That's enough to say that that's kind of crazy.
And by the way, they could lose one game, right, to the right team
Yeah,
and make it still, by the way, with the way tiebreakers work and all that stuff, especially if the teams at the top are playing each other and beating each other.
no, that's 100% correct. I'm gonna go to a game that maybe not a lot of people think about, and I'm not gonna get into the weeds of the game because I didn't really watch the game, but I want to talk about the outlook for the Sam Houston Bearcats coming back, winning a ball game against a good Texas State football team. And I look at the Sam Houston the rest of the way; they're 4-1. They've been playing really good football in the CUSA. Okay, and their only loss so far is to UCF, and they lost pretty significantly to them. But in the CUSA, they host both Western Kentucky and Liberty at home. So when you want to look at the conference outlook, that's a team that's playing really good football and gets some of those tougher games at home. So you have to wonder if they steal one of those games. I think Sam Houston might be a team that makes the CUSA Conference Championship. And I would not have said that before the season. I would not have believed you if you had told me that was the case. But here we are. They have a legitimate chance. The rest of the way that their schedule works out. So that's a team I'm sneakily keeping an eye on. Might have to, watch more of their football games heading forward because as you start talking, now sure they lost to UCF, but as you start coming closer to the end of the season and looking at these conference races, like Sam Houston's a team that's on my radar right now, and it's pretty early in the season, I know, but I'm liking um I'm liking the outcomes of these games. Haven't seen a lot of Sam Houston football, but plan on doing that more this season.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that football game. That used to be a big rivalry game back when they were in the Southland Conference, right? Obviously, San Marcos to Sam Houston, not too far away from each other in the state of Texas. There, obviously, you mentioned they were down 22-0, and they just roared back in that second quarter and continued that momentum in the second half. It was awesome. I kind of wrote that game off. I was like, oh, great. I just validated my opinion of Texas State. I'm like, McLeod, those guys are ballers, and I can kind of focus on all the football games. And all of a sudden, you just see Sam Houston start inching their way back, and they did it. And they did it, man. Incredible things. Obviously, last year did not go as they wanted to, but they look good so far. And you mentioned this USA, man. And Liberty, by the way, has not looked fantastic, too. Western Kentucky, too. Since the switch to Velt Camp, they've looked a lot better, but still, very beatable football team. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a real good point there in the Conference USA. I guess I'll talk about it real quick. Arizona at Utah, right? We didn't talk about this game because of how poorly Arizona had looked beforehand and how dominant Utah had looked. So we kind of figured it would be maybe a lopsided football game, and we were totally wrong. Holy cow. Arizona looked very good. They were physical, they were tough, resilient. Fafita made some big time foot throws, especially in that second half, to kind of either extend their lead or, can continue to kind of fight back when Utah was kind of making a push there. And Utah moved the ball well. They just couldn't finish. They had turnovers, things like that are going to come back to bite you. But I mean, Wilson missed some throws, right? He was 20 for 40. He had some drops that didn't help him either. And obviously, I want not to say that like playing at home is hard, but like I wonder if that kind of got to him where like he's obviously the big win last week on the road. He comes back to his home environment, and a lot of pressure was on Utah. A lot of expectation eyes. It was a massive, huge, great atmosphere there in Salt Lake City, and just a tough loss. Now for Utah, all of their goals are still ahead of them. Like they can win out and they can win the Big 12
100%.
and feel really good about that. They kind of get a bye week, I think, this week where they can kind of reset before getting back into Big 12 play, hopefully with a healthy Cam Rising. But for
Maybe.
Arizona, man, this is
Ooh,
big.
maybe. Right? Who knows? I mean, like, I'm not going to say if they had Cam Rising that they would have absolutely won that football game against Arizona because, like you said, Arizona was very impressive. But yeah, it hurts. Sometimes it hurts. It didn't impact them last week. But yes, moving forward, Utah needs Cam Rising back. If they want to achieve the goals they want to achieve, they need him back.
Yeah.
Let me go Oklahoma Auburn SEC matchup. Peyton Thorne, I thought played a pretty good game most of the game, but just like Peyton
What
Thorne
are we
does,
doing?
what are we doing? But let's forget about Peyton Thorne and his terrible decision making for a second. Let's talk about Michael Hawkins. I like to look at quarterbacks. There's like elite quarterbacks, there's good quarterbacks, there's bad quarterbacks, there's stinky, terrible quarterbacks. And then there's two categories of there's frisky quarterbacks and gamers. I think Michael Hawkins, so far from what I'm seeing, is kind of a gamer.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna call him frisky because I don't think he puts the ball in harm's way, like and he's a true freshman, which is pretty cool. He doesn't put the ball in harm's way that many of the frisky quarterbacks do. He's kind of a gamer, man. He fights, dude. He fights. I'm not saying I don't know if they have a better chance to win football games with him moving forward versus Jackson Arnold, but I liked most of what I saw from Michael Hawkins in this game.
Yeah. I mean, you got to credit, that staff for making the switch and getting a win on the road there. And obviously storming back in that fourth quarter. Obviously, it helped with your defense. That interception, that pick six was big time. It was huge for sure. Kip Lewis made a great play. It's just wild. It was so Auburn. It was so Peyton Thorne, who played well, over 300 yards, three touchdowns, and then he throws that pick and just totally obliterates and totally changes that game. Yeah,
Totally
man.
smears his entire performance with that. That's all
Yeah,
people will remember.
all the good grades he built up, from Auburn fans that game, he's not gonna have it anymore. And for Oklahoma, like you said, it's a good win on the road. Get things right. I think Red River's coming up soon. That's their next game. They got a bye week and then Red River. So we'll see what happens there. Texas looked, I wouldn't say beatable, but they did not look fantastic against a pretty bad Mississippi State team. I'll stay in the SEC. I'll head over to Arlington, right? Neutral site. Texas A&M and Arkansas played each other. Obviously, you're our A&M guy here. Le'Veon Moss played well, right? Finally,
In the
Noah
fourth quarter,
Thomas. Yes, yes, made some good runs. Finally, Noah Thomas got going. Where they targeted him, he had good run after the catch, right? Good things happened there when you were targeting him the football. But Arkansas, man, it's another one of those games where it's like I felt like they were just so close to getting a win here, and they just didn't. They couldn't make that play. Now, is that about coaching? Is that about just having an inconsistent quarterback like Taylor Green? Or maybe an interesting defense there. But I don't know. I got to credit, or it was really the offensive line too. The tackles. I mean, some of the
they're
turnovers were tough.
they're
Wasn't
pretty
really
bad.
on
Yeah.
on Green exactly. So the three turnovers killed you. But listen, A&M, man, say what you want. They are not very impressive so far, but they're getting some wins. They're getting some wins. They're
Got a
taking
big
care
one
of the
next week.
football.
Got Missouri at home, and you're favored by 3 points. That's the opening line. So A&M has a chance. despite how not good they've played, they could be favored in almost every game left on the schedule except Texas because of the home away splits. Now South Carolina will be interesting depending on how they play the next couple of weeks, but yeah, I wasn't all that impressed to be honest. With I mean, you love to see a win for Texas A&M, and with Marcel Reed not playing well and still finding a way to win the football game, and you also had that explosive play he gave up right away, could have definitely folded early.
By the way, heck of a play too, because Green, he was struggling with tackles, steps up in the pocket, avoids a couple guys, rolling to his left, off platform, and just a strike, maybe 45 yards downfield, right into the hands. I think that was Tasella.
Tesla,
Holy
yeah,
cow.
Isaac
And
Tesla,
it set the tone for that game in that first half where, Arkansas was playing well.
yeah. Let me we'll each throw out one more game per. I'm gonna go. Uh, oh, there's a couple games I want to talk about, but I'm gonna go with TCU Kansas. I think I'm gonna go with TCU Kansas. I think Josh Hoover's awesome,
Hmm.
and I don't think enough people are talking about how good and how important he is to this offense thus far. He has been nothing short of absolutely awesome, I think. And Kansas once again, Jalen Daniels. I mean, they scored some points, but didn't look amazing once again. Devin Neal never really got going. Daniel Highshaw was actually kind of the guy that was a little bit more explosive in this rushing attack for Kansas. But this TCU offense, I know this defense has been bad, and the Andy Avalos experiment doesn't look like it's working out thus far. That's not to say it won't work out years to come, but you got to be really happy with what you have in Josh Hoover if you're a TCU fan. You have to be. And this wide receiver talent as well. Beck, McAllister, both over 100 yards. Savion Williams, JP Richardson. Like, there's really good talent on this TCU offense at the skill position. And, you got some nice looks from Payne as well at running back. But Josh Hoover, man, I know he threw 2 picks. He's doing what he can, man. Like, he's doing what he can. I'm, I think he's a gamer, dude. I think he's a gamer.
Yeah, no, I want to echo all that. I'm absolutely with you there. Kansas been super disappointing this year. I was really excited for this team, for this roster, for the talent, for the coaching staff, and a healthy Jalen Daniels. Again, another game where he is not throwing the ball consistent. I don't know if it's healthy or I guess if it's health related or if it's just not him. The thing is, like, he had 4 rushing attempts, and I do not believe that like a healthy Jalen Daniels, a fully healthy Jalen Daniels, is getting 4 rushing attempts when you're struggling to throw the football. I don't
Yeah.
know. I really don't know, but I'll move to the American here, and Tulane looks really good. Continuing to they had a tough out of conference schedule, and they lost a couple of those games, right? And so what, right? They move in the conference play, and they beat South Florida today. South Florida team that has looked somewhat good at times, also pretty vulnerable as well. They were like a weird team because they played Bama and Miami, and those 2 teams are obviously really good. And they hung tough with them for a while, and then both teams kind of separated away. So, but Tulane, man, they're looking really good in the American, and it's them. And I guess you got to throw Memphis and Navy in there as well as
Hey,
Army, just for being some teams that are going to be fighting for the postseason spot there in the American Conference.
yeah, I'm loving what I'm seeing from Tulane. I will be really because they're a pretty physical team. It'll be really interesting when they play Army and Navy. I'm really excited for those games. Memphis is kind of a different breed. I don't know how that. I don't know what that's gonna look like, but I'm yeah. Tulane's 3-2, 2 tough losses, but overall, I mean, they still got a shot here in the American. I'm with you for South Florida. Yeah, it's tough. Alex Golish, the bid for his Power Five job next year for the Florida job is kind of slipping through his fingertips right now. Uh, I don't know. We'll see them moving forward when the rest of the American schedule that they have is pretty not good. So I would imagine that he'll have a good second half of the season.
Yeah, they just played 3 teams that are just better than they are, and
Yep.
they lost pretty bad to both of them. So like to all 3 of them. So right, we're not expecting them to win these football games, but again, you would like to see a little bit more, I think, potentially, especially in that Tulane game in your own conference.
All right. let's go over to the Dirty Dogs. It's a segment where we pick 10.5 point spreads, and we're like, hey, these are teams we think can win straight up. We picked a little bit wrong. All right. I picked Akron plus 385. That did not hit. It was looking actually pretty okay early on. Ben Finley was kind of slinging the pill early on, but did not happen. I ended up pulling away pretty decent. Illinois plus 650. We'll save that, I guess, for when we talk about that recap because I know we did preview that game. That was one that you selected. South Alabama, I took a plus 900. Just I guess a bad read. I don't know. Just they got spanked. All right, they got
You're taking a team
murdered.
plus. You're taking a team plus 900.
Yeah,
Things have to go perfect for them to win that game. They got down early. It was never going to happen.
that's true. Western Kentucky was your last selection, plus 410. They should have won that game, and that would have
Up
been
13 points in the fourth quarter.
yeah, they should have won that game, and then we would be sitting pretty awesome. And we're 4-16, picking the Dirty Dogs, which is about 20%. Given some of the spreads we've taken, I mean that's pretty on par for the course, so it's not bad. If you were to bet these, you'd be down like 2.5 units almost, or a little bit more than that, but 2.65 to be exact. But I'm not.
We're not
No,
encouraging
we're
anyone to
not
be
encouraged
betting.
people to bet these. We don't bet these at all. There's a couple, but we don't really dabble in that aspect. What we do dabble in is the counter. All right, over our best bets where we are both on just heaters right now. Heaters. I went 5-1 this week. If you include, it's 5-1-1. I posted 2 picks late on Twitter, and you'll see it's a little bit contradicting because I took Fresno State plus 4.5 in our preview video, but we recorded the preview video on Tuesday, which was before all of the news. Matthew Sluka came out, or maybe we could record it on Monday. I might have recorded it on Monday, but yeah. So my opinion of that game quickly changed. Not necessarily, it didn't change drastically, but the line moved by 3.5 points, or almost, or 3 points, and I was already kind of like looking at that game like a coin toss, and you were getting what I believed and what we both believed going into that game. Like Hajj Malik Williams is a good quarterback, and why was the line moving by a field goal when you're getting equal to, if not better, quarterback play, and ended up being better quarterback play? So I didn't expect the game to look like that, and but I'll take it. So the winners for me were Kansas State, East Carolina -4, Kansas State -4.5. Sorry, Navy -3.5, Arkansas +4.5. That was a sweat. UNLV -1.5, and then the loss was Michigan -9. Pushed Louisville +7. I threw that one out on Twitter as well. So make sure you're following us on Twitter at the Redshirt Soft because Twitter picks have honestly been kind of cooking recently. They were not last year, but they've been kind of cooking. Your winners for the 4-1 week that you had: Kansas State -4.5, which we were both on; East Carolina -4.5, which we were both on; Navy -3.5, which we were both on; and then you had USC -15.5, and you gave out Cincinnati. Look, you took this. I know you took this at 3.5 earlier in the week, and we didn't put it out on Twitter. That was a tough number because they ended up losing by 3. So that pushed for you. I know you actually got it at 3.5, but
Yeah.
putting on the show for the fans got to mark it as a push. So overall in the season, I'm 20-10, up
Wait, did you talk
8.2.
about Kansas State too? And then we took Kansas State as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Okay, perfect.
yeah. So Kansas State -4.5. Overall on the season, I'm 20-10, up 8.2 units, pretty much murdering. You, big comeback season for you. You're 9-7 right now, plus 1.19 units for you if you were to just straight bet all of these at the same value. Yeah, overall, I mean, look, we're almost up 10 units as a show. Love to see that. Love to see that. And do you regret taking Michigan -9?
No, not at all.
Not
And
at all.
we didn't
Me
get to talk
neither.
about it real quick, and I will. Minnesota maybe had a chance to win that football game. However, Khalil Mullings, the way he ran, like we said, they're going to run the football well. Mullings is a stud on the road, Minnesota, and they got down early. And credit to them for coming back. And I was talking, I was like, I'm not worried for the backdoor cover. I'm not worried for the backdoor cover. Michigan's
There
defensive
it
line
came.
is too good, and here it comes the backdoor cover and
Daniel
almost a
Jackson.
win, outright win for Minnesota. But listen, I got to give them credit for fighting and coming back and win that football game. Daniel Jackson's a monster. They
So
have
good.
they got to get
Elijah
things going.
Spencer. Finally.
Yeah,
Where has he been, man?
he's
And like,
emerging as that two guy. Yeah, that's
yeah, that's
huge.
that's really nice seeing. And Brosmer, he spread the ball out a lot this game, and it wasn't Daniel Jackson heavy, if that makes sense. So he's looking better as a quarterback week to week. I really do believe that. Like week 1, he looked pretty horrible. Week 2, I would say it was fine. It was Rhode Island, but then after that, he's looked really good. So I'm happy to see I'm happy with what I'm seeing with Max Bozeman. The front seven still doesn't look great.
No.
So it is what it is. But yeah, I don't regret taking that at all either. And we got at a good number because they almost covered 10. Like if you got it at 10 or
Yeah,
10 and a half,
yeah.
you would have pushed or lost if Minnesota didn't score that last touchdown. So -9 was, I guess, the best number that we could have gotten at. So good work from us. Yeah, just spraying the boards right now. We're both at least I'm 26 and 15 ATS in the games we're picking, and you're 25-16 ATS in the games we're picking. We're both up in our bets this week. We're just seeing the board well, man. We're just seeing the board. I'll go through the rundown real quick, see our winners and losers in the games we previewed, and then we'll go and each preview each game for because we got Spotify listeners. They need to hear these things, even though people can see it on the screen. My spread losses were Maryland, Fresno State, Louisville, and UCF. Spread wins were Illinois, Alabama, Boise State, Kansas State. My straight up winners, I picked Indiana to win that game despite taking Maryland to cover. I picked Penn State to win despite taking Illinois to cover. Alabama, Boise State, and Kansas State. You were pretty similar. You were on the flip side of the UNLV one, though, and you took Indiana to also cover the 6.5. So you had Indiana as a winner, UNLV as a winner, Illinois, Alabama, Boise State, Kansas State. Your only losers were Louisville and UCF, both as straight up winners and against the spread. So just a good week for you, dude. Good week. I mean, I was going to ask you about the UCF game, but we'll talk about when we get there. First game, let's talk about, I guess, Maryland, Indiana. Indiana's a wagon. I'm going to say it. They are so good, man. Like they overcame, what was it, 4 first half turnovers, and they still put up 500 total yards of offense. They were 7 of 13 on third down. They got to Billy Edwards 5 times. And also, not to mention, I was worried about penalties. Only 4 penalties. No big deal. Curtis Rourke came back in a big way in that second half. He's really impressed me. And that the set of running backs that you got there, Elijah Sarrett, I mean, just Indiana has blown my mind, dude. Kurt Cignetti is really good at coaching football, man.
To lose the turnover margin by 4 and still win by double digits against a conference opponent, that is awesome. And
you gave up 100 yards rushing to Roman Hemby.
Yeah, well, Hemi's a good football player. Well, he had the 75 yarder,
yeah.
That's a big chunk of that, obviously. But outside of that, down to down, they played pretty well against the run. And listen, I'll give credit here to Maryland and Billy Edwards. I thought he played okay. He just ran into Curtis Rourke, and those wide receivers for Indiana are very good. They're deep. There's a lot of them. Surratt's obviously incredible, as you mentioned. But I really like what I'm seeing from Maryland, even though they're 0-2 in the conference right now. They've been battling. Obviously, the Michigan State loss was tough, but listen, the middle of the Big Ten, I think, is going to be super fluid all year. I think your rankings are going to be, very up and down week to week, kind of, and we'll see. Now, however, Indiana is firmly cementing themselves in that upper middle tier, I think, in terms of teams, right there with your Illinois, your Iowas. I guess if you want to throw, Rutgers, Nebraska in there as well. They're battling. They're battling, and I think when we talked about Indiana, we talked about their early schedule. Had a lot of winnable football games, also losable for sure, right at the beginning of the season, but they have looked very good in all of them, despite their turnovers last week. And the hot start was huge for Indiana and Kirk Cignetti in year 1. And yeah, like you said, they are playing awesome.
Yeah, and they're, I think, barely scraping in the top 25. I think Indiana right now, and this is crazy, I don't know if they're playing like a top 15 team to me right now. Like I would probably take Indiana. Listen to me. Listen to this. If Indiana was hosting Missouri, I would take Indiana to win that game.
Well, I mean, Missouri hasn't looked good there, but here's what I'll say too: is it's
But
Maryland.
they're a top 10 team.
Well, we all know the AP poll is whatever,
garbage.
But Maryland and UCLA, I don't want to over exaggerate that. I just think Indiana is, going above our and a lot of the media's preseason expectations. I don't think we should totally rewrite the book already on that. I think it's been super impressive, and I think it's going to continue, right? But to say that
it's their first 5-0 start in like 60 years,
which is exactly my point. I do think we're kind of not jumping the gun here, but it's almost like they're exceeding expectations and we're putting too much stock into it, I think, and we're kind of reframing our expectations for Indiana, which is a good thing. Absolutely a good thing here.
But it's
But listen,
also it's also the eye test though. Like
yeah, oh yeah.
they're passing my eye test. That's why I'm willing to like Duke is 5-0, okay? Duke is not a good football team. Okay, there's a drastic difference between Indiana and Duke. Okay, they're both 5-0 teams. They both have exceeded expectations this far, but I'm not buying Duke stock. I'm scooping up all of the Indiana stock that I can possibly get because they've looked that good and that dominant, right? Can you agree on that at least?
Yeah, yeah. Listen, and I'll also say the resilience too, and the culture coaching sounds like it's in a really good spot. After a couple of years, maybe that not being the case. I want to mention this here that you meant. So we talked about their four turnovers, right? So you had the two interceptions and two fumbles. After those, you know, two interceptions, two fumbles, it was three and out, three and out, three and out, and then a four and out. Turning the ball over on downs. Holy cow. That is incredible. The sudden changeness, obviously, bounce a ball. You're not going to have four turnovers every game, but to have that resilience, to have that, tough and grit and like right away go back out there, get a stop, a huge stop. Because listen, you were not playing perfect offensively in that first half. If Maryland, excuse me, takes advantage of those turnovers, which they did none of them, this is a much different football game. But that's a credit to that
True.
coaching staff, a credit to that team and the resilience there. That's why I'm not going to put too much stock in this win, but I do think it says more about the future of Indiana and maybe not about them winning the Big Ten, right? This year, that's not really going to happen. But in terms of this culture, this program building up, absolutely love to see this.
Let's head over to the Mountain West. Now, when we preview this game, this was before the Matthew Sluka news. Okay, so we were picking this game at 4.5. I took Fresno State at the 4.5, but in the best bets, obviously, I took UNLV minus 1.5. So big conflicting right there. But you took UNLV. You were all over it. For the right or the wrong reasons, whatever. UNLV looked awesome. All right, they looked so good. Haj Malik Williams. This offense just looks so much better when he's at quarterback. He's accurate with the football. He takes care of the football. He can also run. He can also run too. It's not just Matthew Sluka that can run. They're at quarterback. He had 252 rushing yards. Um, they got 4 sacks on Mikey Keene. I mean, they just look so good. Putting up 59 burger on Fresno State, who's a team that, you look at and you're like, okay, they could compete in the Mountain West. Not sure that they'll win it, but I mean, it's kind of looking like right now in the Mountain West, it's kind of a collision course for UNLV Boise State. Who's going to win this thing? And the winner of, like, whoever comes out of the Mountain West could be the representative for the G5 in terms of making the college football playoffs. And UNLV looks every bit the part right now to me.
Yeah, holy cow. I love, we just talked about Indiana having resilience there after their turnovers. You talk about sudden change. Your quarterback just ups it and kind of just, steps away from the team, trying to get his thing. Whatever the story may be, I'm not going to get into it because I don't know exactly what happened. Regardless, though, to have the fortitude, sometimes those things can tear teams apart, but can also bring teams together. And you saw that they came out hot. They came out hot, obviously, had a couple 3-and-outs, but going up 21-0 in that first half and playing on a chip on your shoulder was big time. The block punt was also huge. And then also, too, talk about stepping on the throat of a football team. You had, 5 full drives, not counting the last game, the kneel downs there. 4 touchdowns, 1 field goal. Holy cow, and a couple
None of
interceptions
those
as
drives
well.
more than 6 plays, too, by the way.
Yeah, well, quick hitters,
Explosiveness.
explosiveness, and in terms of UNLV, like actually on the field here, like Hajmalik Williams gives you a lot of what Sluka did on the ground, but he also has consistency and throwing the football. He threw the ball very, very well. 13 of 16, 182, 3 touchdowns. Ricky White, we've been waiting for him to break out. He was the beneficiary to this change here for Hajmalik Williams coming in. He was not, as dynamic as we were used to seeing him against teams like Houston and Kentucky or in Kansas. And he looked very, very good, very comfortable. He had 3 touchdowns on the day, including that block punt, like I said. Yeah, holy cow. Fresno State, maybe they just ran into a wagon, right? They just couldn't run the ball. And maybe part of that was game script, right? Part of that was game script. But again, in the Mountain West here, you're going on the road here, you're going to have to be able to run the football. It's not all about Mikey Keene. Those 2 turnovers, those interceptions, not ideal. But again, I don't know how much you could have done there with UOB playing the way they are right now, it's to me it's more about Fresno State will be fine. They'll be very competitive with a lot of teams in the Mountain West here in year one with the new coach. But UNLV, man, continues to look very, very dangerous.
So dangerous. Yeah, and I don't.
How about Jalen Catalon too, by the way? Jalen
Yeah,
Catalon, former high recruit, right? Good to see him getting active. Very good to see him getting active.
yeah. No, he's playing well, dude. He's playing well. That defense is really good. That's what kind of makes this team like dangerous. It's like I'm not seeing, at least when I watch these games, not really seeing a lot of holes on this team at all. Like especially defensively, Jackson Woodyard is a dog. Okay, Jalen Catalon is a really good athlete. You just got a lot of good talent on this team, man. And they're taking advantage of it. Barry Odom's doing a great job there. In terms of like college football playoff outlook and the remainder of the schedule for UNLV, I mean, you're looking at this. I mean, they got a win against Kansas that is looking less and less impressive. Okay, but if you're the committee, do you factor in that they had Matthew Sluka at quarterback and like if Hajj Malik Williams ends up kind of down? I mean, they play Syracuse next week, which
At
is
home, baby, at
at
home.
home. Like
I I thought they were gonna go there for game day. I really
yeah,
did. I know they're going to Berkeley.
I think we should preview that game, CD. I think I'm gonna
Absolutely.
make that executive decision. So if you're a UNLV fan, just keep coming because we're gonna be riding this train for a while now. And then after that, you got Utah State, Oregon State on the road, which is an interesting game, and then Boise State. You get them at home. You get them at home, and then the rest of the way you play Hawaii, San Diego State, San Jose State, and Nevada. I mean, this UNLV run defense has looked really good thus far. We'll see what happens with Ashton Janty. Don't want to be getting into the weeds too much with this team, but they're looking really good. They are looking really way over exceed my expectations. I thought they might be getting in over their heads a little bit this season, but they've looked really good. Because like Jaden Mayava, like he was such a valuable piece of that offense last year. He was so good, and if Hajj Malik Williams is all of a sudden you insert him and he's able to replace that production, this team is so good.
Mhm.
Considering that they're exquisitely better on the defensive side of the ball. Heading over to South Bend, Notre Dame beats Louisville. Um, Honestly, my opinions of both teams, we both picked Louisville plus 5.5, and we both picked them to actually win straight up. I don't feel much different about either team, to be honest. I think Louisville could have won this game. I think there were some things that happened that, made sure that it didn't happen. I still thought Tyler Shuck played okay. I thought he was fine. The turnovers were not good, right? That costed you big time. Notre Dame had turnovers of their own as well. I mean, Notre Dame didn't even have 300 total yards of offense and put up 31 points. So that to me is kind of crazy. So I'm Riley Leonard. He was efficient. I'm not going to say that he was great. That makes sense. So I'm still waiting for Riley Leonard. Like I don't think Notre Dame. If Riley Leonard continues to look like this, that I don't see them necessarily winning out on their schedule. And I'm also obviously with the loss to Northern Illinois, you got to look better in games like this. You need to look better if you're trying to make a case where you're Notre Dame and you have to get an at-large bid in the college football playoffs. You need to look better in games like this, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Now it's helping you that USC is continuing to win and look good. So if that's a big time matchup at the end of the season, maybe that could sway voters. For Louisville, though, I mean, I was disappointed because part of the reason why I felt so good about picking Louisville here was I thought they had a quarterback advantage and B, a coaching advantage, especially on the field there and coming out after halftime and just kind of struggling there in that third quarter. That was disappointing to me. I thought, yeah, it's 24-10 or 24-14, but it's like, how good has Notre Dame really been? How much are they going to continue to score? Can Louisville make a couple tweaks here and there, take care of the football, and start kind of coming back in this football game? And they just went stagnant in that third quarter. It was too little, too late by the end of the football game. So we'll see. We'll see how Louisville kind of continues to build in that ACC. They've got SMU and Miami notably coming up as well. So obviously disappointing on that end. But again, this is not First of all, it's not a conference game for Louisville, so all of their goals to win the ACC are still right on the table for them to do so. And for Notre Dame, to me, like you said, you want them to look better. I just think this is kind of who they are. Like if they're gonna have to win, it's gonna be win ugly. If you're gonna score points, it's not gonna be your traditional way. It's gonna be being creative, defensively setting up turnovers and whatnot. That's kind of what this team is right now. And like it or not, I think that's their formula to win games where you have a significant potential, I guess, significant quarterback advantage for the other football team. But that defense is so, so good. They're going to keep them in a lot of football games, especially against teams, right, that have, these high flying offenses or explosive plays potential, like Louisville could have with their weapons, right? And also with Tyler Shuck.
Colin Lacey looked good in his first game back for Louisville, so
Good,
that's an
good to
added
see him
bonus.
back.
Corey Brooks obviously looks amazing. We were super high on him heading into this season as just
Yeah.
probably going to be one of the better playmakers in the ACC, and that's definitely turning out to be true. But Louisville definitely shouldn't have their heads down for this. That, like you said, all their goals are ahead of them. They're still a good football team. My opinions of both these teams doesn't really change that much, to be honest. Heading over to Happy Valley, Penn State plays Illinois. Now, this is a game where we both picked Illinois to cover, Penn State to win, and Illinois did cover, but it didn't look great, to be honest. I thought Penn State, I mean, for a team that ran for 239 yards, was 6 of 11 on third down, and sacked Luke Altmaier 7 times, to only win by 14, to me, is kind of crazy.
Yeah, you had a couple of missed opportunities. Both teams, right, had missed opportunities. After the first drive, the scripted, 11, 8 play drives for Illinois and Penn State respectively, I was like, oh wow, and these quarterbacks came to play, and we're gonna have a pretty, fun, exciting games to watch these coordinators go at each other, and then it went super stagnant for a long, long time. That sequence there at the end of the end of the first half for Illinois was brutal. I mean, you get down what to the Penn State 2, the first and goal there, and you end up kicking a 45-yard field goal and missing it.
Yeah, that was
That can't
brutal.
happen there on the road. Gave Penn State and that crowd the life that it needed, and they were able to go in and after halftime come out and get a touchdown. And it almost felt like that 7 point lead was bigger than it actually was because of how well Penn State's defense was playing, because of the crowd, because of Illinois going on the road. And we thought their offensive line would have a chance to block Penn State. And like you said, they struggled. And Altmaier is a good quarterback with a clean pocket and with play action pass. And, after that first drive, it just wasn't quite there. Franklin made some big time catches. He's a good player, very good football player. But for Penn State, too, this is why you're bringing Andy Kolnicki. And I kind of been stressing this all offseason. It's like this was not to develop Drew Allar into a top 10 pick, right? Like he's not a quarterback guru. He's an offensive guru. He gets guys in right spots. And you saw that with the running game here on a day where, yes, Allar was efficient, but it wasn't pushing the ball down the field like we wanted to see against a tough defense and a very good defensive mind there for Illinois. And Kay Allen and Singleton had about 100 yards each, right? Over 5 yards per carry. Like that's what you needed. And that was so, so big in these big games on third down to be able to extend drives. And when he needed to in that second half, get punched the ball in the end zone and obviously extend your leads. That was awesome. And obviously for Penn State, they haven't looked the best, right? They have not looked the best at all, but you got to be a little bit encouraged kind of seeing what's going on here. Even in an ugly loss, you still have positives. And this is the kind of game where, maybe your previous offense coordinators, maybe your previous teams struggle and don't find ways to essentially put away Illinois and let them come back. And if they're driving with a 1-score game, it's a much, much different outcome than if they're pressing for obviously a 2-score game.
Yeah, and it was a pretty slow game too. Penn State was operating very slow as well, trying to just squeeze out. I mean, you also had 2 missed field goals. You had that turnover on
Yep.
downs. You only had 9 possessions for Penn State. So that's kind of what they're going to be. And honestly, it gives them a good chance against teams like Ohio State, where you just need to limit the number of possessions in a football game and see if you can just create some variance, create some big plays. And like you said, Kotonicki is pretty nice at making explosive plays on the offensive side of the football. Yeah, I don't feel worse about. I mean, I was a little bit concerned with what I saw with Illinois, but again, it was it was a different level of talent that Illinois than they've played all season.
No.
So I'm not super concerned with either of these teams. I don't know. It was a bit of an ugly game for sure, but yeah, that's just what Penn State is. They're going to run the ball. And you know what? They're going to go back in the film room and be like, "Hey, we did a really good job running the football. We did a really good job getting after Luke Altmaier. We did a really good job making adjustments." And I don't think the Penn State coaching staff is pissed with the performance of the Nittany Lions at all. Now, I'm sure there's tons of stuff that they're going to be cleaning up on that offensive line and pass protection, but I I really don't think Penn State played a bad game despite only winning by 14 points. Or I
Can I
guess
say
not
this?
covering. I say only winning by 14 points, but not covering, I guess.
Yes, exactly. Can I say this too? Like, in terms of, like, again, going back to Konicki, your run pass split here, 43 rushing attempts, 21 passing attempts. That was awesome. In a day where you're trying to find some kind of explosive plays, maybe, in previous times you have a Penn State quarterback pressing or an offensive pressing to try to make the ball, push the ball down the field, and you get into problems. Now you had the nice deep shot that turned into a pass interference. That was awesome to see. I love that shot play there. But again, sticking true to your identity, that's why I think you're absolutely right there. In that film room, they're gonna be like, we were who we are this week, right? We stayed true to our run game. We stayed true to our physicality defensively. The only thing that does concern me too is I like Franklin. I obviously Pat Bryan, very good as well. I don't know if Illinois had the personnel to take advantage of a potential, I don't want to say leaky secondary, but a spot where I think you could have some problems if you can block Penn State. And that's where you look at their schedule. You've got USC and Ohio State and whoever they would play if they do make a Big Ten or playoff spot. Those are going to be some elite football teams with very good, well constructed offenses. That's where you're going to have to take advantage. You could see a Penn State being taken advantage of. However, it didn't happen this week, right? It hasn't happened yet. Maybe Bowling Green, but but also they gave a lot of teams fits this year so far. So we'll see. A win is a win. Sometimes that's all it is in the Big Ten. I think especially this year too. It's just keep winning, keep on winning. You don't. Penn State's not going to need crazy style points. I don't think. Right? They gotta beat the teams they have to beat and hopefully steal one from an elite team.
Let's head over to Tuscaloosa, where, I mean, I said it in the title of the video when we posted our preview, game of the year. And I mean, absolutely turned out to be just
Second
that.
half of the year.
Yeah, second half of the year. That was honestly an unbelievable effort by Georgia coming in that ball game. I know Carson Beck was getting a lot of criticism for the way that he played, but it was a pretty gutsy performance from him in the second half, stepping into some of those throws that he made. I came away, not necessarily mega impressed with Carson Beck, but I was like, all right, okay, he came back and he bounced back and he did his best and he looked like a good quarterback in that second half. The thing that scares me about Alabama is like you're up 28-0, okay, and your running backs combined for 11 carries.
Yep.
So we talked about Alabama, not really Georgia, by the way, is struggling in the run game, and they didn't have a lot of rushing yards this game, mostly because of the game script that they were having to deal with. But Alabama, not, I don't know. Jalen Monroe obviously has success on the ground. He had 16 carries for like 117 yards, but not being able to run the ball with running backs or choosing not to. In games like this, where you saw it almost hurt them. If it not for the heroics of Brian Williams and Jalen Monroe, they would have lost this game. And that's a lead that you cannot blow at home to this team. And I think part of that was because they were not running slow either. Like they were up a lot of points. They just, I don't know what was up with Kalen DeBoer, honestly. I thought I was a little bit, I was not impressed with the second half play calling there from Alabama. I thought that they should have slowed it down. I thought that their running backs, Jam Miller and Justice Haynes, who are both really good, I think. I don't know why they didn't get more touches. I thought it was weird.
I think that point fantastic. I wanted to bring up Georgia had 7 second half possessions. 7 second half possessions. We talked about Penn State, Illinois. Penn State had 9 in the entire football game. It's obviously much more high scoring, fast paced there. But like you said, if you can run the football, I think it wasn't like an if. It was like I don't think they can run the football. I I mean, Haynes outside that one run was not very good, and neither was Miller. And even in the pass game, they tried to get short passes going to Haynes. He had a chance to, I thought, get a first down, and he couldn't. And whatever happened, he stopped running. He kind of felt the defender on his back.
This is
Regardless,
Georgia we're
though,
talking about, though, too.
I get that. I get that absolutely. And
Yeah.
I, to me, I almost take the other side of things where it's like we saw when things go right or when you're playing very well, you're a really, really good football team, potentially the best in the country as they moved up to number one in the AP poll. Which, wait, whatever. That's going to fluctuate. I think, them, Texas, whoever else, Ohio State, they're going to be fluctuating all season long. But I still think there's room to grow too. And that's the exciting thing for Alabama and for Georgia too. Like the fight and resilience, that stuff was also fantastic too. To go on the road, go down that much, and to be able to come back, hit some big plays, get stops, turnovers defensively. I don't know. I really don't know. I texted a Bama fan right when they won, and of course they were upset. And I was like, only a freaking Bama fan would be upset beating Georgia number two right after that game. But that's the reality too. Is like they know they understand that this game should not have been a game in that second half, and I can't quite pinpoint it. I don't know. Like you said, is it DeBoer and that pass that Sheridan and not running the football, or is it not being able to run the football? And I think both, either or, is concerning. Is absolutely concerning. I think both are fixable though as the season goes on. But
traditionally, they run pretty fast paced off. Like Kalen DeBoer's, they move, they run, they get up to the line of scrimmage. They're moving pretty quickly. But like in the second half, they did not have a drive that was longer than 3 minutes and 43 seconds. So, and some of that was,
quick hitters. But
they actually they only had 2 3 and outs in the second half. Like how do you run 6 plays and you're only able to run 2 minutes 32 seconds left off the clock when you're up, however much they were up with 9:46 left to go? Like that
yeah.
that to me was a little bit alarming. What was not alarming was Jalen Monroe was spectacular. So he was spectacular. He's up there in terms of, if I was to vote for the Heisman right now, he would be up there. I'm probably voting for Ashton Janty right now. Travis Hunter's up there. Jalen Milroe's up there. Probably those three. Cam Ward, I think, is probably in that mix as well. Those are probably my big four right now in the Heisman mix. But yeah, he was spectacular.
I was looking on Sportsbook just to see the odds of Ryan Williams, and I didn't really see it. So I don't know what that deal is there. The storyline would be crazy. He might have a Heisman by the end of his Alabama career. We talked about it. Ryan Williams was probably the best playmaker on the field, right? We talked about that in a preview. We're like, he's probably the best playmaker on the field, and he was, which is crazy. And for Georgia, to me in that first half, like the concern of their wide receivers position, right? Very deep, right? But without London Humphreys and without some like the upper tier talent, I don't know if they're elite separated, elite playmakers to be able to beat the team like this or stay up with an elite offense.
They did make plays in the second
half.
They
did in the second half. Yes, I was very impressed with Smith. Smith's a very good football player. The way they found him.
Dylan Bell.
They used him. Dylan Bell looked very good as well. Lovett started creating a little bit more separation. So we'll see, obviously. And Georgia haven't looked great, but again, they lost by 7 points on the road because Ryan Williams had a monster game. 2 crazy catches. They'll figure things out. They got a couple weeks before Texas and Ole Miss and Tennessee in November. So we'll see. Kirby Smart obviously would have loved to win here, but don't get it.
Boise State just takes care of business against Washington State. I mean, Ashton Janty, 259 yards and 26 carries, 4 touchdowns. And then another, 7 yards on a reception. But yeah, he was a monster. Boise State got after John Mateer, 8 sacks in this football game. They didn't even dominate the time of possession because they just had so many explosive plays with Janty. These 26 minutes to 33 minutes. Kind of would have expected the flip there. Washington State moving quickly. Boise State trying to slow it down, just run the football. And yeah, once again, impressed. Really impressed with Boise State. Really impressed with Ashton Janty. Probably has my vote at this point for Heisman.
Deservingly so, too. But he's really freaking good. And teams, and they already did, they're going to start stacking the boxes, but his run after contact, his contact balance, break tackle, and then being able to get up and hit that second gear once he is, after that contact and after that first level is really special. He is incredible. Obviously, a lot has been made from his like I think his line on Prize Picture, one of those sites was like almost 200 yards or maybe even more than that, and he hit the over, which is crazy. But yeah, this is a huge win for Boyd State. We talked about this game being a potential, right, signature game for both of these teams to make the college football playoff, to make their case for the playoffs. Washington State watching their, you know, dreams of the playoff potentially slip away after this game and getting kind of routed by Boise State, but Boise State firmly planting themselves as they already were, but right there in the Mountain West leaders as well as, that group of 5 playoff spot. Yeah, and we'll see what happens though, because I hate to say it, Boise State fans, close your ears, but there's going to be a game where Janty is not able to just dominate and not able to be an alpha. Maybe it's going to be October 25th with UNLV on the road there, and you're going to have to rely on Mad Max and a couple of these other playmakers on your offense to get going. Cameron Camper's a good player. Matt Lauder had a nice game for Boise State last week. So we'll see what happens there when they have to go to their change up or their off-speed pitch, whatever it may be for Boise State. But as it stands right now, holy cow. With whatever investment, whatever they did to keep Ashton Janty there, first of all, I love it because college football is better when you have stars spread out along the conferences, along the G5 level as well, especially returning starters, returning stars. But it was obviously massive. That dividend, or that investment is paying plenty of dividends already, and then some as it will continue to.
UCF, what are we doing? But also credit Colorado, dude. I mean, holy cow, they got after KJ Jefferson. 5 sacks, shutting down, I mean, for the most part, shutting down RJ Harvey outside of like a couple runs, making KJ Jefferson look not good. I mean, this was a game I think we both picked UCF, and we were both really, really confident. And the reason why you had mentioned in the preview that you didn't take UCF in your best bets was because of the backdoor cover with Colorado being afraid of that. Dude, yeah, Travis Hunter was spectacular. And now Colorado didn't play a great game against Baylor, found a way to win. They played a fantastic game against UCF. They find a way to win here. Yeah, all of a sudden Colorado's undefeated in the Big 12 still. And I'm not saying that they're going to probably push some of these upper tier teams in the Big 12, but they've so far they've exceeded my expectations. I think both of us were probably leaning under on the 5.5 win total for the year, but now the way the schedule breaks down, Colorado is in a position where they can make a bowl game in year 2 with Deion Sanders, which whether or not you like Colorado, that's impressive. All right, with the state of this roster was 2 years ago, that is very impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to give Colorado credit, especially, after how they looked against Nebraska and potentially the ending of that game against Baylor somehow going their way. You got to give them credit for coming out here against UCF, against a team that was supposed to push them around, supposed to dominate them on the ground and defensively. You mentioned they got after it. They got after it. And here's the thing, Shedeur Sanders throws a beautiful ball. Travis Hunter, Will Shepherd, we know there's talent in that receiver corps for Colorado. But the turnovers there for UCF, that can't happen. I think if you were playing this game 10 times, I don't know how many outcomes end up in a blowout like this for Colorado. But again, regardless, you got to give them a ton of credit. And we're going to say it in every game they preview this year. Like, it's going to be hard to just count them out in a game that they just can't win because of the talent, the explosiveness they have offensively, and also some of the playmakers they have defensively too. We saw that in this game too, to be able to have them come back, or not come back, but jump on UCF. Yeah, super, super impressive there. And for UCF, looking forward, this is a game you would love to have. Looking at their schedule, you get Florida next week, right on the road, not too far away from you, but this was a nice game that you wanted to have to continue your momentum, continue your build in the Big 12 before you got into the real thick of things in your conference play. Obviously, they'll go back to the drawing board. They'll figure things out there. Gus Malzahn typically does, and they'll get better as the year goes on, but definitely disappointing for UCF. Hats off to Deion Sanders and Colorado.
Ogunloa, McCoy, very good pieces on the defensive side of the ball. Not to mention Travis Hunter, of course, at corner was spectacular. Colorado at least tried to run the ball this game. Because when you're up big, what scares me about Colorado sometimes you're up big. How do they bleed clock? And they actually had some success running the ball. They didn't try to run a ton, but more than we've seen them run the football. So I was very impressed with the performance of Colorado in this football game. And moving forward, uh, I'm probably going to leave them in the middle to bottom tier of the Big 12 still, just a team that people need to look out for sure. Kansas State hosted Oklahoma State and had a huge, when I say huge, I mean a huge bounce back game. 550 total yards, 300 rushing yards. Avery Johnson looked pretty shaky early, honestly. He threw that interception. Oklahoma State, you know what Oklahoma State did in the first half that they did not do in the second half? Ran the ball with Ollie Gordon effectively. And when they do not do that, this offense, at times, they're explosive. Deshaun Stribling has emerged as like a really nice number one. And not to mention Brendan Presley and Rashad Owens are really good receivers on their own, but Alan Bowman isn't necessarily a game changer at the quarterback spot. Getting those guys, getting those skill position guys to football. Yeah, this was a tough one for Oklahoma State. We were both on it. We both picked Kansas State -4.5. It was on our best bets as well. Yeah, this was a beatdown, dude. And they're gonna have to ride it out with Alan Bowman because Rangel is not the answer either.
Well, first of all, I don't think Bowman is the problem. He is who he is. We've seen him for freaking 7 years now in college football. He's not going to change. He's not going to develop all of a sudden. It's the consistency that is his problem. The thing is to help a consistent quarterback, first of all, play defense. Secondly, run the football more consistently and more often. 50 to 29 passing attempts to rushing attempts. I know game script kind of dictated that, but it didn't really though. In that first half, you were in it, it was not out of reach. Why would you go away from it? And in that second half, Kansas State was able to pull away, and they
D-
just kind of got caught.
DJ
I look at
Giddens.
this one drive here. Oh, good football player. Here's coming out second half, right? Oklahoma State was down 8 points, right? And could have been potentially better, could have been worse. The fumble killed them, obviously, and Kansas State responded to end the first half. However, you come out and you have two dud of a drives with a three and out and then interception. There was two rush attempts on those 10 plays. That is ridiculous to your point. But yeah, Kansas State needed a bounce back game. I'm not going to totally just shift my expectations of Avery Johnson and this offense because Oklahoma State defense is terrible. I mean, they are terrible. We have seen them kind of get torched for a while now. Isaac Wilson looked very, very good last week against them. So yeah, I'm not gonna, completely be like they're back, they're back, they're back. It was a good win. Nonetheless, it was a very good win. You move up to 1-1 in the conference. All your goals are still ahead of you and you kind of get into your bye week and you can kind of reset, figure things out offensively with Avery Johnson, lean into what you are good at, which is running the ball, which they did, and Oklahoma State did not. 300 yards on the ground. That will win you a ton of football games.
Oklahoma State's defense is allowing 480 yards per game. That is good for 130th in the country.
Of how many
Sure.
teams? 38.
What do you say? 134.
How many
It's
teams are
134.
there? I'm 34.
So there'll
Jeez.
be 136, I think, next year. The additions of Delaware and Missouri State. But yeah, 480 yards per game. And don't tell me that you've played some elite offensive juggernauts of teams. Don't tell me. Arkansas. I mean, they've looked good at times, but you're gonna call them a juggernaut? No. Are you gonna call Kansas
Well,
State
Kansas
off?
State is not a juggernaut. They looked like a juggernaut in that second half. They are not a juggernaut.
Yeah, Oklahoma State has some stuff to figure out. They need to get back to running the ball and keep their defense off the field. That's why running the ball is so important, so that their defense is not on the field. Limit the number of possessions in the game because the more possessions that you have in a game with a terrible defense like that, you are going to lose football games. And that's what happened with Arkansas, right? Or sorry, not correction. They actually fought their way back and won that game, but Uh, Arkansas in that game didn't necessarily find ways to milk the clock like they should have. Alabama had that problem like this week with Georgia, and it almost cost them. They ended up winning the ball game. If they hadn't won that ball game, if Ryan Williams hadn't played heroics, we'd be talking about it. They're just this is not a good football team. This Oklahoma State team. They should not have been ranked in the top 25. This is not a good football team. But it was a good win for Kansas State though because their offense looked good, which was something that they just needed to see. You needed to see the ball go in the end zone after the week that you had against BYU. You needed to see it. So, and like you said, dude, the Big 12 is still wide open, brother. Arizona, who Kansas State beat in technically a non-conference game.
Yep. Key
Arizona
distinction.
is undefeated but looks vulnerable. Utah, without Cam Rising, is not the same football team. Colorado is undefeated right now. I mean, just this Big 12 is wide open, as it literally always is. Okay, Texas Tech, are they undefeated? No, they're not undefeated.
In the conference, they are. They lost to Washington State. But
Right.
listen, the problem here with Oklahoma State is it has been these same problems we are talking about on this show since week two. Since that Arkansas game, even in a win, we've been talking about this defense and running game not being up to par. Where you get into a conference, where you get into teams, right, that maybe are familiar with how you play, you're going to struggle. You're going to really struggle. And we've seen it so far 0-2 to start the Big 12. And that's when we talked about Oklahoma State. It was like their schedule was very front loaded, right? With Utah, Kansas State, round out September. We talked about that being get by those games, split them somehow, and figure everything else out in October, November. The problem is you're up behind the eight ball right now. You're 0-2, and you got teams like BYU, Texas Tech, Colorado playing much better than you had thought going into the season, all of a sudden making October and November a lot more challenging than maybe you thought of, especially with how poorly you've been playing so far. But listen, hey, we how many times have we seen Mike Gundy's team start slow and make get better? These teams, these kids, 18 to 22-year-old kids, they're being coached, they're going to develop throughout the season. It's who can self-scout and identify what their weaknesses are. We saw this last year where Oklahoma State was not running the ball well or at all in the beginning of the season, and then they're like, "Oh, we have Ollie Gordon. Let's run the ball 30 times a game," and he was a monster. We'll see what happens this year.
Well, that's it for our recap. Although I do feel the need to bring up some news that's happened just today. Well, kind of in between, we've been on and off recording all day today. Graham Harrell at Purdue. I'm actually wearing my Purdue sweatshirt. That was unintentional. Graham Harrell fired from Purdue, and we've said on the show, man, like I was never impressed with him at any of his stops ever. And he was Purdue's highest paid assistant coach, and he's gone. There's going to be a press conference on Monday or tomorrow, I guess today, when this video comes out. And I guess Ryan Walters will address the interim offensive coordinator situation, who will be calling the plays for them. But yeah, this is bad. I mean, Purdue, 104th in the country in points per game, 110th in the country in yards per game. Jeez, man. Just you're averaging 92 penalty yards per game as well. 108th in the red zone. And I know you played Notre Dame and Nebraska, okay? And those are two pretty good defenses. But seriously, it's pretty bad. And that's not the only thing that's wrong with Purdue. Okay, Ryan Walters is a defensive-minded coach, and their defense arguably is worse than their offense, giving up 242 yards per game on the ground, which is 131st in the country. But yeah, Purdue's got problems. You and I both took Purdue, not the under on their wins, under 2.5 conference wins. And that's looking really good for us right now. But we'll see. Sometimes an interim coordinator can spark some life in the team, but time will tell.
Yeah, even against Oregon State too. I mean, Hudson Card under 100 yards passing. They didn't really get anything going offensively until they started running the football well in that fourth quarter. And by that time the game was over and out of hand. Yeah, something needed to change for Purdue. Obviously, we talked about this year potentially being part of the continual rebuild that is, Purdue football, with Ryan Walters, obviously all the success Jeff Brom had and took with him to Louisville. Yeah, a lot of things have to change, and you're not starting the way you wanted to. Why not? Why not change something? Why not try something different? Because whatever's going on right now is not working. There's obviously more than just Graham Harrell that's going wrong right now and needs to be fixed. But that's a start, right? Sometimes, like you said, these things can ignite something, change something. We'll see. We'll see. They don't have a bye week until the end of October, so they got to figure this out and figure out fast. I look at a guy like Corey Patterson. I don't know anything inside information, but he has been a coordinator in seasons past before, not at Purdue. But obviously they'll figure something out. Hopefully they can get something going. Get Hudson Card. They got some talented receivers and a two-headed monster. Well, I'll say two-headed running back room with McAbee and Love. We'll see. We'll see. Purdue's got a tough schedule, and yeah, it has not looked good so far.
Well, that's going to do it for us today. If you guys like the content, like the video. It's a simple rule that we have over here. Consider subscribing if you want to be with us for the entire journey of this 2024 college football season. We appreciate all the support. We're almost at 500 subscribers. It'd be really nice if we could get to 500 by the end of next week, by maybe the next 2 weeks. That would be really nice. So we'd appreciate it if you guys can help us out with that. That's it for me, CD. Anything for us on the way out?
Oh, appreciate you guys watching. Hope you guys are enjoying the season as much as we are.
We'll see y'all in the next one.